everyone. This is Tony Holbein from Growblocks. You're listening to The Revenue Formula with Mikkel and Tony. In today's episode, we discuss the shift from volume to optimizing throughput, when you need to shift and how. Enjoy. I was a bit under the weather this weekend.
Yeah.
And my oldest, he was at a kid's birthday party, right? And you know how this goes. He's still at the age where mom needs to join or dad needs to join, so dad didn't join. But mom obviously did. And he's picking up that I'm sick and not feeling so great. So they were at this event. And as it turns out, basically all moms. It's just moms, like it usually is, right? So and then in front of the whole audience, my Theo is he's a very caring little boy.
Yeah.
And from the audience, it's like, why is dad not feeling so good? And then Cici goes, well, because he's a little bit sick. He doesn't, it's not so good. Everyone listening, right in the middle of the room, everyone is listening. And then he looks at my mom and super scared. It's like, does he have the man flu? And all the women on in the room just on the floor laughing. It's like, yeah, that's it. That's exactly what he's having.
Oh, he got you good.
Yeah.
Such a smart, clever boy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. How do we bounce back from that, man? And the thing is, I had a intro about volume and now it's gone, but it's all good. It's all good. No, the thing is, we're going to talk about why when volume won't cut it. And sometimes, even the man flu won't cut it. You still have to show for those things, right?
I know. And I mean, I pushed through. I always kind of managed the other boy.
Yeah.
I was shouldering it.
You say manage. I'm just seeing you lying down on the couch and him playing.
Paw Patrol. Yeah. Paw Patrol. Watch Paw Patrol.
Dad, can I have something to drink? Yeah, go out. There's tap water out there. Oh man. Yeah, we've all been there. No, so we're going to talk a bit about when volume won't cut it. Because this is I've told you a couple of times when I've talked with founders in the past, it's we need marketing to come in and we just need more volume. We just need more volume. That's what we need. But here's the thing. There's a point in time where that's actually not really the case anymore. And there is that phase shift, which we want to talk a bit about today.
No, exactly. I think more is always better. Let's just take efficiency and cost aside. Do you want to have 500 demo requests or do you want to have 550 demo requests? It's I'll take 550. Thank you very much. I mean, there's no reason to have less, right? In that case, and I think as you mature as a business, and actually, if you really unfold this a little bit, as you mature as a motion, as a market, and as the S curve, basically. There's a phase where volume is the right thing to push.
Yeah.
And then there's a phase where volume you can push as much as you want. It's not going to happen, right? And I think this is number one, that to kind of see that coming, that's really difficult.
Yeah.
Actually, right? And when we were prepping this episode, we were basically kind of also talking about how what we're going to talk about today can seem like an excuse for VP marketing.
Well, that's why we're not making, we can't do it. We're at this point in the S curve.
But you know what I mean, right?
No, I know.
If you as a VP marketing, and we're talking 10, 20, 30, 50 million or something, if you as a VP marketing come back, it's well, there's just, we're just done.
Yeah.
I think there will be, okay, cool, let's get a new VP marketing in.
But to be fair, we've also seen it with some of the customers we've worked with. I remember vividly a case where it's you know what? Yeah, it's kind of tapped out. There's not more. And I think if you've listened to previous episodes, we've talked about there is that point in time. Everyone will follow an S-curve, period. But once you start noticing what we're going to get into today, that actually you can't get month over month more volume, then you probably want to think about, is there another S-curve we can now go and build?
Yes, they're kind of two different approaches, right? Kind of try and build a new S-curve and then what we're going to talk about today. But I also think, whenever I chat with people and then this hey, this is tapering off, hey, this is a TAM problem, right? And And it never is a TAM problem,
No.
obviously. Let's just be honest. It never is, but there is something that's connected, which is, well, you've only been talking to the part of the TAM that goes on Google search and looks for an actual solution to their problem. And this is probably 3% of the market.
Yeah.
Right? So that TAM you probably have exhausted.
Yeah.
You're not going to get more out of that. I don't know. TAM is probably the wrong way to, out of that potential audience.
Yeah.
You're just not, right? And then people go into, well, okay, then let's engage people that are maybe considering and kind of aren't aware yet, or make them aware. Kind of, you try and kind of go up in that way. Other ways are try and go on other channels and so forth, right? So I think there will still be people around that might need your solution. Don't get me wrong, but really you should be thinking about them as little pockets, actually, right? And for example, in our phase as Growblocks, kind of we're not looking at the entire market of SaaS B2B or B2B in general as our TAM right now. Kind of that would be ridiculous. We're actually looking much smaller. Preferably SM, but actually also people that are in this crossing the chasm overview are kind of pre-chasm, kind of not the early majority, but they're a little bit more risk-taking. I mean, it's a new company. Kind of this is what we're actually kind of looking for, right? Kind of people that are taking a bit of a... Well, exactly, right? So, and once this is exhausted, we will be like, oh, where's our market? Did we exhaust a TAM? No, there's like the real game still is starting with the early and late majority, right? And you need to kind of look at your business and realize that you're somewhere here, you're somewhere constrained. It doesn't make sense for you to go to the CEO and say like, we don't have TAM left.
No,
that's ridiculous. But probably for whom you're talking to right now, and might be a specific market, might be through a specific channel, you're probably tapping out. There's probably a solid argument to be had that you're at the wrong end of the S curve, and the big question is now what?
I think the first thing is, how do you know where you are? Like when do you know it's hey, we're about to move away from this volume increase constantly? Because you got to know before we get into the solution, basically, right?
So the thing is that, and again, I would not recommend to do this for your overall funnel. I would recommend you do this in a bit more unblended way, where you're basically seeing growth rates starting to decline. And you need to be a bit smart about this. It can be that you do it market by market. It can be that you do it, search, other paid channels, organic. It could be that you're doing it inbound versus outbound and so forth. But basically, what you will see over time is that for some of those channels, they won't keep growing month over month or quarter over quarter. They will start tapering off, basically being flat. And whenever you encounter one of those to be flat, you obviously want to have, and you don't need to zoom out a little bit, maybe a year or two to kind of see this. But when you see they're flat, you basically want to have a conversation with people managing this, like, well, what could we do? Can we push this up? Can we increase it? What's going on here? And very, very likely, the answer will be no. There's, we probably can't do anything here. I tried this myself like crazy with, adding all kinds of budget to Google to really squeeze out the last thing. But it didn't really change much. We kind of put more into Facebook.
It just got more expensive.
It didn't really change much, right? So for the market, and this was like DK, UK, and Germany, we were kind of tapped out, at least for the channels that we kind of knew of, right, at that point in time. And that was a problem because in my pre-Growblocks revenue model, I wanted to see those MQLs tick up in order to hit actually the numbers that we need to kind of hit. Right? Kind of that was a clear thing that needed to happen for us to hit the overall revenue stuff. And since we couldn't actually find more MQLs or more volume, we are starting to get a little bit effed. Like for real, right? And I think this will be a thing that you probably see in pockets across your business as well. And this is where you're seeing like, okay, for that area, for that motion, for this part, I might be switching from a more volume mindset. And, the way of operating to a different one. Right. And I think executing that switch, we can make it uber complicated and just say like, all of these different tactics. But ultimately, as you mature, all of your tactics will hit that ceiling. You could be hitting the ceiling with half of your tactic and some of them are still growing and you're looking this in an unblended way and you're like, well, we're still growing a little bit. But really what happened below the fold is somewhere you already hit it, and you just luckily had some additional S-curves you're building up, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, all of them will taper off, and you didn't need to realize, okay, we now need to switch mindsets a little bit.
Yeah. No, I mean, and also just to make it super real, I ran conferences at one point. There are only so many conferences you can go to. So once you've booked your place at every single one, it's like, yeah, now we are done growing. It's like, can you get a bigger booth? And it's like, yeah, but there's not going to be much more foot traffic.
Yeah.
So it's just a super common thing. So if we assume now that some of the listeners out there, and they're obviously super intelligent, we know this, but they realize
because they have listened to us for a while.
Yeah, and also read a bunch of stuff, and they realize, oh, wait a second, we might be in this point in time where actually we're not going to be able to significantly increase our volume anymore, and it's not going to help us in reaching the targets.
Yes.
What should they do?
So, and this is so stupid and so simple.
Love it.
It's really, I mean, this is generally speaking, kind of, we call it the revenue formula.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you write this out, right? So it's opportunities times conversion rate times ACV times time. So sales cycles equals revenue. And what you've previously been thinking you're doing, or what you have been doing, is you basically kind of struck out conversion rate, ACV, and sales cycles. You're basically, you know what? That's fixed. Can't do anything about it. And just what it is. So how can I improve, the right-hand side of the formula in terms of revenue? How can I get that up? More opportunities, more MQLs, more leads, more SDRs, right? Kind of that's how you get this up. And as you see that, more of this stuff isn't working anymore, you need to shift your focus now to another part of this equation, which might be, many people obviously run into ACVs, but we actually want to talk about, conversion rates.
Yeah.
Right? It simply, you as a business need to realize, if we want to grow, we have two plays to execute overall. One is to focus on improving our throughput. Or number two, try and do a wild swing, new massive market, new product, new something to try and kickstart everything again. But really, those are the two choices you have.
Or the customer side.
Sure, yes. I mean, this is, yes, you can always kind of go into the right-hand side of the bow tie. I just, for the sales and marketing side, you can't really do that.
No. And then now we're going to focus on mainly the new biz side.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Yes.
It makes sense.
So, and really, right? So you need to shift from a volume approach. And honestly, you need to have the kind of the buy-in also from the team. And you also need to kind of realize that some of this might work or not work. But guess what? It's the same exact thing with you trying to get more inbounds in, right?
Yeah.
Kind of on the volume side, right? And today we want to talk through basically kind of 3 steps.
Yeah.
How to start improving that,
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah. And I believe the first step in this process is process.
Yes. It's process is the first one. And really so boring. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm sorry. All the VP sales folks okay, skip next one, please. It's the first thing is actually process, right? And those can be, the reason why you start with that is you might just be doing the wrong thing all to begin with, right? So before you try and, fix other stuff with automations or upskilling or whatever, the first thing is kind of looking, are you even doing the right thing in the first place, right? And this process could be a thing that has to do with your sales process, obviously, right? Going from opportunity to close, that's a sales process thing. And the first thing you're gonna encounter here is people will be hesitant to even assume that you can improve those conversion rates.
Yeah,
right? That will be the first thing that you But actually, the way I would actually start changing my mind around this is a little bit like the following. So we basically jumped into, okay, we need to, at this former company I was working, we basically jumped into PLG.
Yeah.
Right? It was sales-led first, and then we added some PLG to it. It wasn't the right ACV. It was the right thing. It was overdue to do it. Now the company's, I think, mostly only doing this anymore, right? And we started out with having a full funnel conversion rate from someone visiting or kind of completing the trial form to actually kind of checking out of 1%. Benchmark should be around 3 or 4% or something.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. And then, we were like, where are they stuck? And we looked at this. They're stuck over here. Let's build something. Oh, they're stuck over here. Let's do something else. Oh, here we get a lot of questions. Maybe here we inject a human to kind of, take care of those questions. And over time, we got it up from 1% to 3%.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was. I forgot, right? And this is a crazy 300% improvement. That's insane, actually. But really, what did we introduce here? We introduced thinking about, are we doing the process in the right way?
Yeah.
Right? And yes, humans are different, sales reps are different. But if this is true for something like PLG, it also is true for you as a sales team.
Yeah.
If you could, let's just imagine if you could make sure that your whole sales team is doing the sales process exactly as your best reps, or what you define being best practice, do you believe that you would be able to improve your conversion rates? If the answer is yes, then you also have to believe at the same time that there is something you can do in order to push this up. And I would urge you to reject this whole, well, there's some magic people and they're just doing it better. You know what? If you're selling $100K, $250K deals, you know what? Granted, do that. But for all the rest of us, I just don't think so, right? So the first thing is really thinking about, what's the process, what's the best practice, making sure that this is adopted widely, pushing for this.
Yeah.
So this is the whole this sounds really difficult, Tony, for the sales side, and it absolutely is. This can improve your conversion rates for that part of the funnel. But since we're not just looking at conversion from opportunity to opportunity one, you can look at any place in the funnel.
Yeah, I think it's also if you're prioritizing looking at the throughput, another thing you will notice all of a sudden is the efficiency of the different things you're doing, right? So you might be, to your point, have jacked up the budget on whatever paid channels you have and realize that actually we can decrease this budget by 30%. It's not going to change materially anything. And what can we do with that 30% budget? Well, we can hire a consultant to finally fix these things on the website that were broken that we don't have time for, or hire a conversion rate optimization specialist for the marketing side.
So this is literally what we did, by the way. So this was a growth at all cost time. So we didn't cut any budget.
No.
We just added on top.
Yeah.
But what we basically did there was we invested in the website and did conversion rate optimization, like a lot, right? Because whoever then landed with us, we wanted to make sure that we captured the most of that further down, right? And we then looked at those conversion rates from, landing page to sign up, from someone hitting the trial form to completing the trial form. We did A/B split tests, and we found out that, we had a trial form that was 7 or 8 different fields, including your phone number, because it really was a way for sales to work.
Yeah.
But once you don't have the sales team in there, once it's PLG, you can look at this differently. So super simple stuff and this was SMB, high volume, so don't get me wrong. But what we did is we actually found out that we had to keep most of those fields. We kind of realized we actually had to, for whatever freaking reason, but we had to. So what we did is actually we created 3 forms.
Yeah.
So the first form was your name, your last name, your whatever, your email address, and you're like, oh, this was easy. Submit. Next one.
Yeah.
But there's psychology behind it that, oh fuck, now I'm committed. Okay, those 3 fields I can do. Then you get the third one. It's like, okay, now I have 6 out of 9. Sunk cost fallacy. Now I can do these 3 things as well. If you had seen those, 6 or 7 up front, you would be, fuck this. I'm not going to do it. So this is what we found out. We found out that we actually could exclude the phone number. There was some issues with the product, so we had to send a phony phone number. Can you, I think you can say, we had to send it in the API to the product for this thing to spin up, but we actually didn't require anyone to put in a phone number. Actually, right? So we kind of figured all of those things up, and see there, suddenly our, people that landed on the trial page to actually completing it went up. We used things like, more trust pieces around why you should do it, yada, 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 yada.
But I also think this is where, again, this is a process thing, right? So when I've at least done this, we used a high tempo testing framework, use ICE, so impact, confidence, and ease, to rank ideas against an objective you have. There's a lot of actually mechanics here, no matter where you're working. It's the same for sales. We've discussed this. There's medic, spice, whatever, right? But you got to look at those processes and say, hey, have we actually instrumented the right processes for where we are today? Because it's about the throughput.
The next thing I did, and I'm not sure if this actually worked out or not, but the idea was basically we did still get some I think it was the same company. We still got some demo requests inbounds, right? Kind of, they were great. They were usually a bit bigger, wonderful.
Yeah.
And I basically saw a fairly large drop off from someone inbounding to someone actually being booked on a demo.
Yeah.
So what did we do? We wanted to cut down the speed to lead, basically. In that case, I made one of the SDRs being inbound SDRs, only working on that stuff. Immediately when it comes in booking it, what happened? Our conversion rate from lead to opportunity went up, right? And all of those small things, right? And the cool thing obviously is, as the educated listener knows, all of these things compound over time, right? What was it? If you find 7 places in your funnel and improve them by 10% each, you will actually double the throughput of the whole funnel, right? And, all of those small tweaks, they added up to actually kind of delivering then us some growth. And, ultimately, this is how you need to start thinking about this. You need to kind of look at every single conversion rate that you have and ask yourself, like, what could we do to kind of improve this, right? And that thinking is fundamentally different from the let's get more stuff in. And I think this is, executing that jump, I think it's difficult.
Yeah.
And I think it's really difficult.
So that's process. What's up next?
Yeah. So the reason why you start with process is you want to understand if you're even doing the right things.
Yeah.
Right? Before you automate something, you want to understand that first, right? The next step is actually tools. So, So think about, and people might be like, wait a minute, tools comes after that, blah, blah, how does that work? And actually the worst thing is skills and people comes in the end. Isn't that weird? Shouldn't be the other way around. So think about the following way. Let's just say the process says you need to dig a hole in the ground. That's the process, right? And then you have someone standing there that needs to do that.
Yeah,
that's
and it's going to be top down, right?
Yes, exactly. What kind of person do you actually need to hire to do it if the tool is a shovel?
Yeah.
Or if it's one of those like
mini diggers.
Yeah. Or if it's an actual, like, I don't know how they're called.
Or dynamite.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. So, the skill of the person needing to do the job differs from the tools that they have to use in order to do that, right?
Yeah.
It's a bit mixed up and weird and the other way around, but you need to just keep this in mind. So this is where I now go for finding different ways to improve this, right? And sometimes it might actually be okay that, that whatever tool you're choosing, all of the folks that you're working with, they're skilled enough to kind of operate this, obviously. But that's really kind of the idea behind it, right? And what is happening here? Well, in the past, it was kind of those types of like a chili piper. They can route those leads, more efficiently. It might be, all kinds of other things that you have in the stack that are helping you improve, right? I mean, optimizing for A/B testing, that helped you to figure out what to go for. Thousands of other things, right? So this is really AI comes in and might actually create this new frontier thinking about this, right? Because previously, when you think about a tool like Outreach, for example, right, it enabled you to send more of those outbound things and enabled you to send them faster, like per rep, right? You basically on those 2 dimensions, this was better, great, let's buy it. But real disruption happens if you're not only doing it faster and more often, but also higher quality, right? This is where kind of, things break basically. And, TBD, but this is where AI can actually take us, right?
Yeah.
Kind of sending those emails, without typos. We have achieved that a while ago, but, really situational fitting for that person that sits there that is receiving that stuff. So kind of using those 3 things in combination, that might actually create a vastly different output for you, right? And then the next thing is here, and I've seen this all over LinkedIn now, and it's even kind of for us here at Growblocks, it's even the same thing. It's like, yes, we have 2 SDRs at this point, but we have actually someone else that is kind of a mix between SDR and like a RevOps person.
Yeah.
In order to operate this machinery, which is like all kinds of different things stitched together, just taking that person that previously has been like a kind of a real estate realtor, basically, or has been doing some other, sales related, like a recruiter, sales related tasks, fresh out of college and put them in this job and try and, operate this machinery. Right now, you can forget about that.
Yeah.
Right now, this actually requires much more of a tooling process, RevOps mindset. Yes, coupled with some of the skill, sales skills in order to operate something like this, right? And here it really comes in that you're probably one of the tools before you decide on who actually needs to jump into this, right?
Yeah.
And again, kind of, figuring out those tools, each each tool can basically kind of help you kind of get a little bit better in your throughput approach here.
Yeah.
And finally and lastly, I would actually end with, I think if you're honest, I think this is where a lot of value of Growblocks actually sits, kind of helping people figure out the throughput between those different steps. So this is really, if you're thinking, I just have to. So this is kind of the tool here in our case, basically kind of helping on the throughput side, kind of determining where is it you're falling off a cliff, where can you improve, what to maybe do about this. This is, I think, where Growblocks as a tool comes in. But that's it, right? Kind of figure out what the process is. Are you doing the right thing? And then, implementing tools in order to, improve each of these steps over time.
Yeah. Good. Let's go into skills then, because that's the last piece. You actually have folks doing this work, and you teased a bit in the last 2 points. About, who is someone who can handle dynamite or shovel. Yeah. So let's get into kind of that side.
There's obviously that, right? Kind of who can operate which tool and so forth.
Yeah.
But then ultimately, I think, and this is usually easy to take off. I mean, come on, it's it should be sales with a HubSpot. Oh, sorry, need to hire a completely different team. I mean, that's not the case, right? There are some edge cases that we kind of try and pick to illustrate the case, but usually kind of the team kind of can figure this out, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, now that you know that you're probably doing the right process, that you're utilizing all the tools that can help you to, improve this, now it's really at the point where you want to make sure that everyone is skilled and that you're kind of teaching them to be skilled in order to execute this stuff flawlessly, right? And I think we had some great speakers on the show already that were thinking about this in terms of what great looks like. So figuring out what that is and then trying to implement that and so forth. Thinking about the 4Ds from Kevin Dorsey in terms of, I forgot, like demonstrate,
define, document, blah. Demonstrate.
Yes. And those are hands-on ways of how you can take something that another rep does extremely successfully, using the process, using the tools, but still apparently that person is sprinkling something on top that not everyone in your team fully gets. Distilling that and then teaching that to everyone else, and then making sure that they're actually executing that. That is really what this last step is about, right? Kind of really making sure that incrementally you get better.
Yeah.
And this is, we started talking about this a little bit in terms of process, but I think this is where 80, if not 90% of sales teams fall flat on their faces. Like you have a couple of people that are extremely skilled and so forth, but really mastering this process piece and creating this repeatable engine and so forth, this is where they're kind of failing, right? At least for the sales team, because it's also a different mindset for you as a leader, honestly. Kind of if you're like the VP of sales on the first 0 to 10 million, you're like, whatever, practice, and hey, you just bring in this deal and so forth. But as you go from 10 to 20 to 50 to 100, these differences matter a lot.
Yeah.
And they matter a lot because you don't have more volume. Volume is fixed. That's done. So now your team actually needs to over time improve how much they're pushing through, right? And I had like an interesting LinkedIn conversation with Colin Catmus that we're also going to have on the pod tomorrow.
Yep.
Like not when you're listening, but just in our real
We're going to
time
record
right
him tomorrow.
Yes. And he was kind of doing a LinkedIn post on you should actually be paying your sales reps by conversion. Like,
I saw that.
Their conversion rate should be determining how much you pay them. And, there's some wrinkles in that theory for sure. But really, this is actually starting to be the mindset you need to be thinking about, right? Because again, volume is fixed. You cannot have more volume. So really what you now need to focus on is like the reps that are getting this fixed amount, you actually want to pay the ones that are converting the most. You want to pay them the most.
Yeah.
Not who's hitting whatever target. It's really about the conversion, the throughput that you want to ideally incentivize them against, right? And that kind of thinking, it doesn't happen in the first 10 million. It just doesn't, right? It's just out of that kind of world and also focus. But as you kind of, realize that this one other part is fixed and, to kind of change, I think that what needs to happen. And what frankly also then sometimes needs to happen is that the mindset of the leadership team needs to change, or the leadership team needs to change.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of those are the only options to kind of go through this thing, because otherwise you're going to run into the wall.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to end it. So I feel like we've covered now this, when do you know whether it's time to shift focus?
Yeah.
And then we basically look at how do you improve your throughput through process, tools, and skills.
That's it.
And so if you liked it, which I'm hoping you do, you will obviously write a lengthy review or short one, or just hit subscribe and support us on...
I heard it's easiest to do it through the phone, right?
Yeah, probably on the phone.
Yes.
Because that's also where you're listening. So no need to get your laptop out of the bag.
I was pointing...
Yeah, the process...
I think on the desktop, you can't write a review on Spotify. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, you're right. You can't. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
You're kind of weird.
So the best way to do it is actually through the phone, because some of the desktop apps don't support a review, which is super weird, depending on where you're listening. But otherwise, please do that. Help us spread the word, fulfill the mission here. And thank you so much for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.